Hello, everyone, and welcome to our panel discussion today for our African American film series for the film A Most Beautiful Thing. I am Essence Wilson, and I am here to welcome you to the seventh annual African American film series of Communities First Inc. Communities First is a nonprofit organization located headquartered in the city of Flint, but we have a reach across the state of Michigan and also in Indiana. We are thrilled to have with us an amazing panel of individuals who are familiar with the sport of rowing, something that may not be familiar to many of you, but we are going to dive into a rich discussion today about the film A Most Beautiful Thing. So if you're not familiar with the film, it's about a group of young people who were introduced to the sport of rowing at their high school. And they were in the city of Chicago, and Chicago has long had a history of violence and gang activity. And these young men were honestly transformed through the sport of rowing. And so each of the folks on this panel today have either a connection to the sport or to the criminal justice system, and they are going to share their insights and their thoughts about the film with us. So we're going to do some quick introductions to get us started. We'll start with Gabriel.
All right. Thank you so much. I'm Gabriel Groulet. I serve as the vice president of the Michigan State University Crew Club, and I've been rowing for about 10 years. Thank you so much for having me today.
Glad to have you. David Banks.
Hello, everybody. Thanks for having me here today. Excited to be here. Guess I got a couple connections with the film. I'm a friend of Arshay Cooper, known him for who was the kind of the main character, I guess you could say, in the movie, and based off his memoir. We've known each other since 5 or 6 years. So he's been a great friend. We have a love for the sport and trying to change the sport. And then my connection to rowing. I'm originally from Maryland, DC area. Grew up not knowing anything about rowing, about the water. Played basketball, ran track, got into Stanford University. First week I was there, decided to walk on the rowing team, and then kind of kept moving with it. And I was fortunate to some doors opened up for me, and some really great supporters and people there for me. And I was fortunate to make eventually 2 Olympics, 2008 and 2012, representing U.S. Currently now no longer competing. I live out in Oakland, California, but along with Arshay, devoted to trying to change the sport and try to give this opportunity to as many people as we can. So thank you for having me.
Thank you for being here. Percy, could you introduce yourself?
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Percy Glover. I am a C County ambassador. I don't have any connections or tie rowing. My work is primarily around the jail and prison population, creating pathways of positivity for our young people so they don't enter jail and prison, and heavily involved in eradicating generational poverty. Here today because obviously awesome documentary that really touched our young community. So I just thankfully had the opportunity to share.
Great. Mariah, could you introduce yourself?
Hi, my name is Mariah Kent, and I go to Cass Tech. I'm currently a senior, and I started rowing early March of this year.
Hi, my name is Ethan Kent. I'm a freshman at Cass Tech, and I've been rowing with DBC for about a year now.
Great. As you can see, we have the right folks in the room to have this conversation. So I want to start with our rowers. So how did you get involved in the sport? What was your introduction to the sport like? Who recruited you? How did that happen? We can start with Gabriel.
All right. Thank you. So my hometown, there was a middle school learn to row program. And in middle school, I was this real tall, lanky, maybe 120 pounds, 5'10", which means that my options were pretty limited. And so my parents got a flyer for a learn to row. And I had no idea what that even meant. I thought it was going to be something like kayaking, canoeing. I was a little wrong. And so I started it off when I was maybe 11, 12, and I just fell in love. And I've been doing it ever since. I started in middle school. I rowed 4 years in high school, and now I'm in my senior year at Michigan State. I'm still doing it, and I still love it.
And I'll ask, you said it was, you thought it was like kayaking or rowing, or I'm sorry, kayaking or canoeing. So what is the sport actually like?
Not nearly as fun. So the biggest difference is there's traditionally 8 people in a boat that's almost 60 feet long, and we row backwards. So it's all in the legs, all in the back, which means that you propel yourself basically going backwards, and you have one little person steering at the front, making sure you don't hit anything. And so it requires you to be focused with your teammates. Everybody has to be in the same headspace. Everybody has to be working together. It's very disciplined, but it's also, once you get that feeling of just moving on the water, there's nothing that beats it.
So, David, can you tell us about, what inspired you? You said you were a walk-on in college. Most sports, early exposure is key to being successful. So I'm just wondering, how did you just kind of walk onto the team and then excel as you did, and what inspired you to get to join the team?
Yeah. Well, in this country, rowing, it's just, it's not as prevalent, right, at a junior. So I'd say, high school and on down. So just aren't as many people doing it. For me, I was just sort of fortunate, kind of some circumstances. I was at Stanford, and the team there needed some walk-ons, some just bodies. So same kind of thing as Gabriel saying. I was walking around that first week, didn't know anything about rowing, didn't even know anything about the water, or really care for it too much. And this guy, hey, you're kind of tall, come to this walk-on meeting for rowing. I was like, I don't know why. And he said there'll be a dinner there, right? So if you watch the movie, Arshay and his guys, they followed the pizza. I did the same thing. Went to this meeting. There's some dinner. Saw this little video they showed. I said, okay. I was still in love with basketball, right? I mean, I grew up thinking I was going to be, Michael Jordan, right? I got cut from my freshman basketball team, but I still thought, I was still going to make it, right? And so I get to school, obviously some things have changed, but I had a competitive drive in me. And so, yeah, just one thing led to the next. We came to the campus. They showed us this demonstration in the back of Gabriel on his back shoulder. You see a rowing machine. You've probably seen those at the gym. So the coach had all these rowing machines lined up in this big gym, and they had all the varsity guys, do like a 30-second, on the rowing machine, which is nothing. But they just go at it. If you see everything, the rowing machines are like literally jumping. People are grunting. I don't know. There's just energy about the sport that something about it just drew me in. And from that day forward, I said, okay, I'll check it out. I think in the back of my mind, I was like, okay, if I do this, they told me it was about your legs. I thought the same thing Gabriel did. I thought it was a canoe or kayak. It's all your upper body, but it's all your legs. So in my mind, I'm like, oh, now I'm gonna be flying, right? I'll be dunking all over, doing all this stuff. But I got into it that way, sort of that energy from it, and slowly you get into it, right? It got better, and you see yourself getting better. By no means did I excel at the beginning, but it's a sport where you kind of give to it, and it gives back, 1,000 times, right? You put in effort, and I saw that effort come out. I saw myself getting better, and this little fire inside me just kind of kept growing and growing and growing, right? And I kept kind of just following it, and fortunate to have definitely some circumstances, right, that really helped to help me keep going. But that was it, yeah. Sort of this fire inside, and I wanted to keep seeing where it would go to.
So what I heard from both of you is, you just kind of happened upon it. It wasn't something that was like intentional or that you sought out. It just sort of happened, which is a great thing. And I'm glad that you both were able to discover the sport, because we can hear your love for it as you're speaking about it. So Mariah and Ethan, I think your introduction is probably pretty similar. So I'm going to say, Mariah, can you tell us how you were introduced to the sport of rowing?
Yeah, so me and Ethan both were introduced to the sport through my mom. She had a meeting at the boat club that we row at now, and they told her about the sport. And so she was like, oh, we're just going to try it out one day. I thought it was a one-day thing until me and Ethan, we went there and we saw the team, and she asked us if we wanted to do it after that week of like Gabriel said, the learn to row, and it was really fun. And that was just being on the machines in the ergs, and we had not got to experience being on the water yet. And Ethan, do you want to say something? Okay. But yeah, that's pretty much how we were introduced through my mom having a meeting at the boathouse.
And both Mariah and Ethan have participated in a program that Communities First has called Culture Shock. And really that is exactly what our organization tries to do, is expose people to new opportunities. And we're excited because we will have a rowing experience in the summer for 2022. And hopefully Mariah and Ethan will be willing to help us with that and make sure that we can make people feel comfortable having that experience. So thank you for that, and thank you to your mom for encouraging you to try it, but then also being supportive. I know that there have been some really early mornings, but that's great, and I think that's one of the components that's really necessary is to have some commitment by other people who care about the sport and care about those who want to participate. So I want to go back to David for a second. I heard you say that you competed in the 2008 and 2012 Olympics. So on a world stage, what's different? What was that experience like?
Oh, I mean, yeah, the experience overall, yeah, it was an amazing sort of experience. Obviously it's sort of a long journey sort of to get there, right? And so yeah, just things change, right? After school, I had an opportunity to train. So in the how rowing works, it's not a professional sport, right? So there's no professional rowing league, right? So the highest level is the Olympics, and it's amateur in a sense, right? And so how we do it in this country is basically we have a central training place. At that point in time, it was Princeton, New Jersey. So if you want to make the team, you kind of get invited to this camp and you go there and basically row all year round, right? And at some point in time, you mix and match combinations to find fastest boats. So the Olympics obviously is every 4 years, right? But there's every year there's a world championship that you're training for, and so it kind of goes like in the peaks and waves, right? The Olympics is here, and then the year after, everything kind of settles down, and people kind of, kind of go back, and every year that world championship gets more and more competitive. So every year there's something to train for at that high level. The Olympics is the Super Bowl, right? And so you kind of get in these 4 years sort of cycles, right? And so you get in it, and it's sort of a long haul, right? Like anything you want to do, whatever it is in the world, right? If it's hard, it can be challenging, right? You face ups and downs, you kind of go through that. So a lot in that process, it's kind of like after school, right? You're at a high school or your college, right? You're representing your school, right? And it's a little different after that, right? You're kind of on your own, right? And you're trying to make it. And so in a ways, for me, it was really profound, right? Just the support of my family. Like when I, finally made that team, that was such a big part of it. Was I could kind of finally give something back to them that they could experience and share, that they'd given so much to me. And then when you make it, you kind of put the uniform on, you really kind of, it hits you a little bit. You really feel like you're not representing just yourself anymore and trying to make it, right? Or just your school. It's really everybody out there, and everybody out there who didn't have that opportunity, that was always a big piece when I first started too, to understanding that part of my sort of my mission. And so when you get there, you're not necessarily you're usually just kind of focused, right? And you're kind of on this mission, and you kind of have your, you want to have your head down and really just stay focused and sort of do the best you can. It's an amazing experience. You see so many people from around the world and all the kind of all the pageantry of it all, and so you try to stay focused, and it's a challenge, but it's all part of it. It was an amazing experience, but it's all sometimes, again, it's sort of about the journey, right? And I think the beautiful thing about this sport is it can give so much at any level, wherever you're at, right? You kind of experience these things about the sport that are so unique with it, that those are the things that kind of really stick with you and that you really kind of carry forward. And you could be in middle school or high school or whatever, right? You kind of feel these things from it that are so special. I think that's some of the things you saw from the film. So yeah, obviously it was an amazing, fortunate to represent, and you try to do your best, and then you kind of go from there, and yeah. I think you're on mute.
I'll ask this next question of Ethan. What the question is, what was it like your first time on the water? But I'll preface that with what Arshay Cooper said. He said, "I'll never forget the first time I was on the water. We get in the boat, bow pair started taking some strokes. We were moving. As we were moving, you could see the skyline, you could see the John Hancock building. It was the most beautiful thing I had ever seen. And so, Ethan, what was your experience like the first time you were out on the water?
So it was a lot of emotions going through my head. I was scared. I was excited. I didn't know what to expect. And when I got in the boat, I was scared it was on the flip. But I was excited because when we were on the ergs, it was pretty fun. So I was thinking once I'm good at this, then it will be more fun and like exciting. So it was a lot of emotions, but in the long run, it worked out.
We could definitely see the emotion in the film. Even when the gentleman got back out there after having been off the water for many years, you could see the emotion. You could see the training that they had because they were able to, they say it's like riding a bicycle, right? And I don't know that I would have associated that with rowing, but it was pretty cool to see them be able to, get back out there. That those muscles work the same way, and they were able to be successful in that. So lots of emotion in the film, lots of emotion, it sounds like, in the sport of rowing. And Gabriel, what was it like your first time out on the water?
I mean, I feel like an old man right now, like, 10 years ago. But I think Ethan put it perfectly. Like the first time you get out on there, you're carrying the boat down the dock. And, when I was a little kid, it was heavy, your arms getting a little sore. You put the boat down and you step in, and it's like, it feels like you're on the water in this 60-foot boat. And so it's a lot of mixed emotions. You're excited, you're nervous, you're terrified, but you're also really just happy to be there. And so once you get the boat moving, like once you just leave the dock, you feel like you're in a new place, and it's wonderful.
Yeah, awesome. I want to switch gears for a moment and talk with Percy, because Percy, you come to the film with a different lens. Can you tell us your initial thoughts about the film and how it connects to the work that you're doing?
I have to admit, I absolutely loved it. From the first few seconds of it, I was captured, and I didn't move from the TV until the very end. It's an amazing documentary that I encourage everyone from every walk of life to sit down, listen, and have a dialogue about. There's so many aspects that we can learn from. And I know when we talk about what was the one thing that really stuck out for me, one thing that really touched home for me is that everyone initially saw the rowing team at FIT. They didn't win anything. They had no real backing support from the school. They had no real funding. All the things look like program had failed. But look at how it impacted the lives of those young men and where it pushed them and promoted them. That's what captured me. I have an interesting story in my role as a Genesee County Ambassador Sheriff's Office. I initially met Sheriff Swanson about 30 years ago when I was sitting in going through the process for a lot of different charges. He was a rookie deputy then, and I didn't realize that we would develop then would transform into what we do today around jail reform and jail corrections. So for me, being in a situation where I potentially could have got life in prison, where like over. Who would have thought that today I would have been in places that I am now, that I'm changing the culture with race relations, policing. I'm involved in, again, changing the face of what jail looks like, implementing a program that's not being done anywhere in the world, where for those young men, can return back to the streets, but those seeds are planted through the rowing program by their mentors, from their coaches, still develop and process at one point. Sparking theme for me that really resonated home.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting. I heard David say earlier that he's working, and there are others, and Arshay is one of those folks, working to change the sport of rowing, and then hearing you talking about changing the culture around criminal justice and around the prison system. I just think that's really amazing. And then when you think about the film and how those different aspects kind of come together, right? So different aspects of the same work, I think, but all very important and very critical. I want to go back to David for a quick second and ask you if you can tell us about the work that you're doing to change the sport. And then Percy, I want you to share maybe more specifically some of the programs that you're working on to change things in criminal justice.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, since my early introduction to the sport, you quickly look around and you realize just aren't a lot of people of color, right, in the sport. And one thing that kind of really hit home for me when I started is, I really realized, hey, even as I was going through it, I just had this amazing opportunity, right? And I thought back to my own family and just realized how many people, my own family, just never even had this opportunity to try the sport, right? My dad's from Southwest Kentucky, right? And grew up in a segregated high school. His grandfather, he was a brilliant man, right? He could have owned his own companies, right? But he was black in Southwest Kentucky, at that turn of the century. So he worked the coal mines to support his family, right? So I just realized, hey, there was this amazing opportunity and something I found. So there's just early on in me, there's just kind of this mission inside to see, okay, what can I do? As I kind of progressed through the sport, I was fortunate some other doors and opportunities to be able to do that. So I think right now, a lot of the work, a lot of people are trying to do. Arshay is helping to really lead this effort, and there's a ton of people around the country all over doing really some great work. Is how can we attack some of these problems, right? And how can we, I think for me personally, it's like, how can we open up this sport to other people in so many ways, and find ways to do it that can connect with people. And a lot of things is just giving, right? Giving back to communities and connecting. And at the end of the day, just trying to get people on the water and enjoying it and having fun. And then we can kind of go from there, right? There's always different levels to the sport, but how can we make the sport sort of more relevant and just more fun and more, accessible and some opportunity. So in Oakland, what we're doing, some work, we're partnering with some local community groups here. We go to some parks all the time, doing stuff, bringing rowing machines. It's just being present, right? And I think that's something that's been lacking in the rowing community, is just sort of a presence, right? You go to a lot of places, right? And, the boathouses, and Arshay talks about it all the time, looking at a boathouse without walls. There's always walls up, right? There's all these barriers where if you walk by, you just don't feel welcome or, wanting to be a part of it, right? So how can we break down those walls, break down those barriers, right? And let people in, right? And try to attack the problem from that sense. So yeah, we're here trying to number different programs, trying to get kids involved at young ages, at middle school ages, enjoy it, have fun, get on the water, and then, progress from there and try to make some, try to make an impact. But it takes a lot of work, I think it really takes a lot of work. A lot of the work that, that Percy is doing, right on that ground level, really working with communities and people and building relationships. That's where it's all about. So it's exciting, and being part of this endeavor was definitely, inspiring and motivating.
Yeah, I think that's amazing. I know last year we did a film, and it was about hockey and about Willie O'Ree, and same sort of things. People of color feeling welcomed, feeling like the sport is accessible to them. Just that early exposure and kind of normalizing that there are people of color in the sport. So when we had that conversation, I know one of the barriers was cost. Hockey is a very expensive sport. So I'm just curious. I'll ask Gabriel. Is rowing an expensive sport?
Yes. So coming from my perspective, the team I'm on currently is a club team, which is a little different from David's experience. This means that we're recognized by the university, but we don't receive any funding from them. And so what this means is all of the travel we do, we compete across the country, all of the boats we have to purchase, even things like the insurance for our boathouse, are subsidized by our members' dues. And so there's this kind of double-edged sword where it's our goal to recruit as many people as possible. And so for a lot of people, this is the first time they've rowed, kind of like David was mentioning. This is the first time in college they're learning to row. On the other hand, though, there's this kind of trade-off where if people are unable to actually pay their dues, it can strain the club. And so we have to walk that fine line of making sure it's as accessible to everybody, and while making sure we're still able to raise the funds to have a team. I think our team has done a really solid job of towing that line. We have on the board of the team that I serve on, this was the only other time I've ever seen another Latino on a crew team, but there's still always progress to be made.
Yeah, thank you for that. And I do think it always is, a fine line of trying to create a program that's sustainable, finding funding to make it accessible, and trying to just, like you said, walk that fine line. Percy, we're going to come back to you. So tell us about some of those programs that you're working on in Genesee County related to criminal justice.
Okay, one of the big things right now, earlier, that eradicating generational incarceration is really important. I'm sorry, so sorry for that. But eradicating generational incarceration is very, very important. To consider that most children follow the patterns, steps, behavior, and attitudes of their parents. So if you have a mother and or father that's struggling with jail and prison, it is likely that their kids experience those same struggles and issues. So the Angels in the community is doing a toy drive that is specific to the children who has a mom and or a dad arrested in the Genesee County Jail for the holidays. So kids ages 1 through 12 who has a parent in Genesee County Jail for Christmas, we are doing a toy drive. So we are looking to impact about 500 kids. And again, all kids need a high level of care, attention, love, support. This American kids need something a little different because they're struggling with the absence of a parent and dealing with the emotional aspects of missing a parent and or parents. They're struggling with embarrassment of having a parent in jail. Economically, they may be struggling because they don't have that fiscal support of a parent. So there are a lot of different aspects that are a little unique for this population that needs just a little bit of attention. So we want to be those angels that come in as mediators to support, show that love, show that interest, and show that there are people out there that take interest for you during the holidays and will take interest in you as a child or young person who has. So that's the big thing that we're working on right now. We do a lot of different things in the community. Earlier this year, Mother's Day bailout, significant for a mom dealing with incarceration, because the mother is that nurturing peace family structure. They are that family structure that if the mom is not there, it hurts entirely. Just being really honest about it. So yeah, we do a lot of different things. Like I said, the Genesee County ambassadors, we primarily work as advisors, mentors to the jail population, which is really unique in itself. When we talk about stereotypes and those young men being a growing team, where traditionally it's not for that is where you find people of color heavily involved. And like you said, Essence, I believe a big aspect of that is primarily exposure and economics. Gabriel shared that it's an expensive sport. So people from impoverished communities financially typically can't be involved, as well as they've not been exposed to it. So understanding that in my role being a very non-traditional role, for somebody who's experienced jail and prison, I spent a little more than a decade in the Michigan prison system. Now be sworn in as a Genesee County Deputy Sheriff Ambassador, working with the sheriff and the population is unheard of. But people who have lived experiences are most times the best instructors. April, David, Mariah, Ethan, for some is interested, wrong. Obviously, they are the best mentors. You know, for somebody like me who had the unfortunate experience of and made a great deal of mistakes, but found a way to bounce back from, I'm probably one of the better coaches for somebody that has those struggles in their lives. So, on and on. But yeah, there's a lot of different things we do in the community around jail reform and supporting the offender population.
Yeah. Well, thank you for that. And thank you for the work that you're doing. And I heard you speak about two different programs that are really instrumental in targeting multiple generations, right? So you talked about a Christmas program where you're giving gifts to 500 kids of individuals who are incarcerated, but then also talking about a program working with kids who have mothers who are incarcerated. And so somebody put in the comments that they were impressed with the transformation of the mothers as well as the sons. And some of them even got clean from drugs. And so there were these family dynamics that shifted as a result of the young men being involved and connected to rowing. I just want to know if anybody would like to touch on that and, maybe even how you've seen that happen in your own family or how you've just seen the ripple effect or the impact or even just in connection to the film and what happened with those young men. All right. Well, I nominate David. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, I think that's such a sort of a powerful part of the film, right? Is dealing, the mothers and I know for me, you look at it and it, it really kind of just humanizes everything, right? I mean, all these mothers, you could really just see the love that they have for their children, and things happen, right? And things they went through, you could see that you could just see sort of the love and just how strong it was, and I think part of the film, or part of the guys, they found a way to kind of deal with some of the trauma that they were experiencing, right? And that helped them kind of understand themselves, I think, and also understand their families better as well, right? And still find those ways to maintain those relationships and improve. And you could see that at the end of the film, right? You saw all these guys were all entrepreneurs, successful entrepreneurs and business folk and fathers, right? And then you saw the mothers and the love that was there. I was fortunate to be part of the filming and was there, and there's some scenes there that didn't make it. When we were in Chicago, when they came back, they had the medals around their neck, right? And you just saw just the love. I mean, that really hit me, right? They came back, and 20 years ago, right, they didn't have a chance to experience this with their families, right? This sport and what they found. But then 20 years later, it was just amazing to see all the families could be there to celebrate what they had accomplished and where they were, not just for rowing, but who they were as men. Everybody, they went through some things. There's good and bad, and so I think that's again, the beautiful thing of the sport. It was what has allowed these men to kind of deal with that trauma and keep moving forward, in spite of it, right? And still, and then that love, I really love how it connected to their families and humanizes everything. A lot of the issues that we see in the world many times, right? You lose that your humanity, right? And these are all mothers that were going through things, not bad people or anything like that, right? And I think that was really powerful to have them be a part of it and be able to speak to it. And yeah, just so many connections there. It was just really, really, really great to see.
Yeah, definitely. There was a good portion of the film that talked about that trauma, and that constant trauma can mean higher rates of depression and PTSD, and that particularly for young people, they'll grow up and they end up operating in survival mode, right? So I think it's important for there to be these exposure opportunities and programs and mentors for young people in particular, but sometimes old people need it too, right? Where we can really just wrap our arms around folks that we know are in our community that are struggling. And so Communities First does work around homelessness, and it's it's similar but different, obviously. But that compounded trauma over time that people experience in difficult situations, and the distrust that they have for people in places in positions of authority. So there's some similarities, but really it comes back to being able to show love for other people, being able to acknowledge that trauma has occurred, and support people as they have ups and downs and make mistakes. And everybody's path is not linear, right? there's the ups and downs, and I know that we've all experienced them. So Mariah or Ethan, I want to ask you, um, what do you feel as though you've gained from the sport of rowing? Like, are there any things that you've gained or benefited from the sport?
I think I've gained the ability to work with people who I personally wouldn't have wanted to work with. Like, we don't get to create our boats as most teams, our coaches do. And sometimes you get in a boat which you don't think you should be in, or you think that you're better than, that boat that you should be in. And I've had to deal with that and gone to races, and it wasn't really a good mix because personally I've done races where I haven't practiced with the people in the boat, but after a couple times of doing that, you learn how to after knowing the sport, because it was kind of in the beginning when I was still trying to get a hang of the sport. After a while, it just becomes like second nature of it doesn't matter who you're in a boat with. You should be able to work with anyone. And so I learned how to work with others, no matter um, their expertise or my expertise in the subject.
And I want to add that starting rowing, it gave me like confidence because I know when I started, I was very scared and feared of the water. But over time, I gained the confidence to get on the water and be excited and know that going on the water won't be the worst thing in the world and it'll be fun. So
Yeah, so it definitely sounds like there's a lot that can be learned through, I mean, any sport. But I think, as we're talking about rowing, it is something that's very foreign to many people, even to, you guys until you got really to the high school or the collegiate level. So I'll ask Gabriel and David the same question. What are some qualities or some benefits that you've gained from being involved in the sport?
All right. Um, that's a wonderful question. I think so. Mariah and Ethan both really touched on the ability to work together, and that's huge. I think one of the biggest things, the biggest takeaways I've had from rowing though, is how much you have to trust the process. Um, so when you're rowing, when you're just kind of toiling away, like for example, right now my team's in winter conditioning, so we won't touch the water for another couple months, and so it kind of drives you nuts. You want to go out and you want to do it all right then and there, or during a race, you want to go all out, but you almost have to just kind of hold yourself back. You have to have this kind of confidence in yourself, your teammates, and your abilities that this is how I'm supposed to do it. I need to ease up a little here so I have a lot more left at the end. And it's that kind of quiet confidence of just being able to kind of take your foot off the gas and know that you're doing exactly what you need to do. And so that's something I've learned in rowing. And I think that's been one of the most valuable lessons I've been able to take to other kind of aspects of my life, is just being able to like take a deep breath and just say, trust the process.
Yeah, that's a great answer. I mean, I think similar to me. I mean, I think the things that I really learned that, you know, yeah, you kind of give yourself to it, right? And you show up. And so if you show up and you do something and you do what's kind of in front of you, you don't cut corners. Like good things will happen, right? I'm not saying everyone's going to the Olympics or this or that, but I do believe it will change you, and good things will happen along the way that teaches you so many life lessons. So you do those things, you show up and you do what's in front of you. It's good will happen, right? You're going to face some ups and downs, right? You're going to have good, you're going to have bad, but so many times, in this sport, I've worked so hard and really pushing for something, right? And then you kind of fail, right? And it could be easy to kind of get that, hit that failure, hit that wall and just take a step back, right? But if you trust that process, like Gabriel was saying, you keep pushing, you keep doing those things, you keep showing up, you do it with integrity, right? You do what's in front of you. I've just been surprised so many times that next day, that next practice, that next race has been like 100 different, 180 degrees different, right? And it just changes your perspective. When you thought things were down, you thought all the chips were down, everything was gone, and that next day could be something that just changes your life. Literally, it's happened for me in this sport. So it just taught me so many things that have resonated to so many other areas of my life and how I approach things. And I think Mariah and Ethan talked about it, kind of gives you that confidence, right? So when you're in there and you've done something and you've done it and then you failed, like at any level, I think Mariah, Ethan, Gabriel can imagine, right? In this sport, sometimes you're in that rowing machine and so many times you're doing this test and you failed and you failed. And that time when you break through, it's like you could be your king, queen of the world, right? It doesn't matter what level you're at. So that's the things you learn in this sport that you can learn at any age. And it sticks with you to how you approach a lot of other things, right? You trust the process and kind of anything that you're doing that may be challenging. Gabriel spoke about it well. Like, so if you're at the start of your race and I'm already thinking about the end, you're kind of done, right? I need to go, okay, what's that next thing that I have to do? What's that next step, right? So for young folks like Mariah and Ethan, like you're about to take this big test and you're freaking out all day. Okay, it's okay. Just go about my day, right? I still got to get to school, right? I got to do this. I got to go to that class, and you kind of learn how to be present and kind of keep pushing forward. So I could go on and on. It's just, so many life lessons for me that I've learned that resonated so many other areas of my life that it's just been a real blessing that I was fortunate to find the sport.
So I heard a lot of benefits and a lot of takeaways that you guys have from the sport. So I heard you talk about how the life lessons or the lessons that you've learned translate to other areas of your life. You talked about resilience, trusting the process, conditioning, building confidence, being able to work with others, and then just generally teamwork. And so I think about the options that were presented to the young men 20 years ago, and the possibilities of, being a part of a gang. I mean, they talked about, on this side of the street was one gang, on that side of the street was another gang. And basically when you walked out of your front door, you had, choices to make. And there was an expectation at a certain age that you would make those choices. They talked about seeing, their first murder at the age of 10 or 11, right? So that's the compounded trauma piece. But there's also a part that I think we need to realize where they had a desire to have family and to have camaraderie, right? And so instead of that being a destructive thing in terms of entering a gang, they found a lot of that in the sport of rowing. And so I want to have Percy talk about a little bit why you think some of the young people desire to be a part of a gang, and like how does that process occur? How should we be wrapping our arms around young people and trying to deter them from that lifestyle?
I always say that young people need to be blanketed. I don't think there's any way you can just wrap a young person in your arms. You have to wrap them in, especially the day and age, because there's so many temptations and so many hurdles and obstacles and distractions for young people to get in. It's just ridiculous. And not only temptations, but the way those temptations are received, whether it's text, email, social media, chatting on game systems. There's so many ways that a person can be led in the worst direction. So they really have to be blanketed. With that, when you look at why young people fall into gangs and that type of activity, obviously for the young men in Chicago, they said plainly that it was for security and safety. It was very, very dangerous. Growing up in a very high gang community that was very impoverished, it was for them, it was a safety net and a security. Instead of having to fight 10 guys alone, now I have a team that support me where I can now appropriately defend myself. Sometimes is fitting in. It sometimes is from the impoverished community and being embarrassed of not having things. So having friends that support and welcome you out, insult you, or rubbing in your face that the material things that life has to offer. Sometimes that's hard for a young person. A lot of it is those emotional struggles, as you see some of the young men. I have a mom who was in prison, so he didn't have that traditional love from a mother, so he started out in the community from his friends. So it's just a lot of different young people get into gang activities to get less. But again, like I said, we have to blanket our young people, and one of the biggest things blanketing them is listening. I think as adults, as mentors, as coaches, we traditionally do all the talking because we feel like we have all the right answers. But if we just listen to our young people, they will give us the appropriate answers and solutions to support them. Just listen. That's the biggest thing.
When we did our screening of the film this past Thursday, there were people that were walking out of the theater, and one lady said that this was one of the best films that she's ever seen before, right? And so in saying that, I think it really was, there were so many different things that resonate with us, right? It's one thing to read a news story and hear about, a young man or a young woman who's, involved in gang violence or something happening. It's a different thing to understand that story and kind of be able to walk through a person's life to understand how this occurred. And, because we read the headlines. Some people don't even read the article, right? We read the headline and look at the picture associated with it and make assumptions. But I think that this was an opportunity for people to really understand the story of a group of young men and the difficulties that they experienced, but then also the successes that I think Percy spoke to earlier weren't what the coaches were hoping for or expecting, right? They didn't all go on to be, collegiate level rowers. They started businesses. They, started families. They did just positive things. And in one of my previous roles, I was a mentoring and leadership coordinator. And I think there was an intention from the program that we would mentor kids and they would all go off to college and they would become doctors and lawyers and all those kinds of things. And after being involved with that program for 10 years, I realized the victory may have been preventing one of them from going to jail. The victory could have been inspiring them to, develop relationships with their family in a different way where they would have support. It's not always what we accomplish. Sometimes it's what we can prevent. I don't know if that makes sense, but young people are facing, even in the best neighborhoods, with the best economic opportunity, they're facing so many challenges right now that I like what you said, Percy, blanketing them, right, with love and concern and mentorship is so critically important. So at this point, I think I want to also mention that, if people are interested in a rowing experience next year, we want you to send us an email. Our email address is info@communitiesfirstinc.org. And I'll put that on the screen in a little bit so you guys can reach out to us, because we definitely want to coordinate that so that we all can have that opportunity to be out on the water and feel what you guys have felt, because it sounds like it's an amazing experience. I know when I looked at it, I said, okay, this is a little tiny, thin, skinny, long boat. And many people of color are not used to being out there on the water or are afraid of the water or can't swim. So there's a lot of challenges to overcome and some anxiety to deal with. But anybody who would like to, who's in the Flint area or the Detroit area, we certainly want to coordinate some things to make sure that we can have that happen. And if you have not seen the film, it's available on Peacock. So please, please, please take a look at it. It's a fantastic film on so many levels. David, I know you have connections and you are friends with Arshay. Can you describe him for us? What kind of person would you say he is, and what have you learned from your relationship with him?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, he's an amazing, inspiring man. We've done a few things even before the film. He has done so much work across the country, visiting hundreds and hundreds of schools before any of this, blew up. Right, he was talking to so many kids, so many youth about his experiences and just trying to impact them. And he's just a powerful messenger and an amazing speaker. I've had to unfortunately come follow him many times at a couple of events. You know, you get Arshay going, and then here I come up. You know, it's always tough. But no, he's just an amazing way he can connect with people, anybody, all kinds of people, right? And it's just such a powerful message, right? And it really just kind of inspiring and gets you once you want to be a part of it. And so yeah, we're trying to do, a lot of people are doing a lot of things. We talked a little bit about the economics of it, right? And so one of the things Arshay really wanted to do is take some of the energy from this movie, from the movie and the documentary. How can you practically impact people? So he started it's called the Most Beautiful Thing fund, impact fund. If you go to the Most Beautiful Thing, if you Google it on the website, you'll find sort of links to it, right? So that's ways people can donate. So what he's doing is going across the country to a number of different clubs and donating time and resources to help people who are on the ground doing work just get a little bit more, right? And trying to see if we can push people forward, right? There's a number of great examples of people we're working with, and there are people all across the country, right? And I think it is expensive, but I think that's one of the things we need to do in the sport is we all have to give back. We try to leverage all of our resources. So how can we do this, right? We know it's expensive. We know what's up again, what's in front of us, but what can we do? The coach in the movie, if you watch, his name's Mike Tatey. He was my Olympic coach. He gave me. He's a funny, amazing man. But he'd always said, one of the things he said, is America doesn't send people to the Olympics. Americans do, right? And so sort of that message that, right, we always say we're all together, but we are. So how can we leverage this, right? There's lots of clubs across the country who have resources, right? There's people there, there's resources there. So how can we leverage those resources and spread them in those communities so we can really just impact it, get schools involved, right? Get universities involved. So there's a number of other programs that are out there that we're all trying to do, and how can we do things in different ways and creative ways? How can we work with, criminal justice, system? There's lots of other programs in many different areas. I was doing some work. We tried to get some things going in Trenton with some groups in there, and Trenton, New Jersey, some things like that. But so how can we think creatively of how can we keep impacting so many different areas? I think we can, just by leveraging all of our resources, right? And then we got a messenger, someone like Arshay, kind of spreading that message. It's amazing and very impactful. So it's been great working with him. Yeah, if you hear him, you speak with him, you're ready to go. You're ready to put your boots on and get to work. So that's who he is.
Yeah. So the film, I think it really did. I would say creatively, right? Because it's a very energetic film. There's moments where you're excited and you're like, amped up. Then there's moments where, you either cry or you're almost wanting to cry, right? But I think that it exposed us, and some of us more than others, right, to this like wider lens to better understand and see systemic inequalities that exist not only in athletics but just also in our country. Gabriel, is that something that you would like to speak to a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the things I think is really important about this movie is that rowing for most of its history was rich and white. It was an aristocrat. I'm choking on my words today. It came from England. It was at Oxford and Cambridge, and then it went from there to Harvard, Yale, and the Ivy Leagues here. And so for most of its history, it has been for, the kind of top echelon of affluence and whiteness. And so seeing that this movie making the splash it has, especially from a point of view that we don't see represented in rowing very often, it has just been, it's been very uplifting and very motivating. And because I've been reading about A Most Beautiful Thing in not just like rowing magazines because I'm a nerd like that, but like New York Times, Wall Street Journal, these kind of mainstream audiences. And so I'm not quite sure what like the entire legacy of it will be, but the impact it's having right now, especially with Arshay's actual actions right now, it's incredible. And I'm happy to be in this moment to see how it plays out.
Wipe that water.
So I think it sounds like other members of your club have seen the film as well. Do you know, what is the response of others been like?
So off the top of my head, I can't think of who has seen it and who hasn't. Just because usually at practice, our coach tells us to stop talking in the boat more than anything. But I know for a fact that this has been the first year after the pandemic that we've been actually able to practice. And so I know that right now we have the most diverse team in Michigan State's history. And so I don't know if that's intentionally people saw the film and were really inspired to join the team after that, or if this is part of a more indicative of a larger trend where it's people that wouldn't consider rowing are trying it out. And so it's kind of hard to say one way or the other if it's because of this film. But I know that those who have seen it on the team or who have read about it or read the book have all been very excited about it. So.
And I saw that when you said stop talking in the boat, I saw Mariah laugh, and I think Ethan may have as well. So I want to talk about that a little bit without getting into any trouble or anything like that. What has been your experience with your coach, and just what does like practice look like, either Ethan or Mariah?
Well, my coach is like very strict, and when we talk, he gets angry. Like on the dock or in the boat, he always screams, "Stop talking." I think it's just because he wants us to get better, but yeah, it's like he's always strict, and I think he just wants the best for us, and I do too, because our team has been through a lot. And
For me, it's more of our coxswains in the boat who is more telling us to be quiet, because usually sometimes there's something wrong with the mic, and sometimes we can't always hear them, so they're always telling us to be quiet, which is kind of disappointing because sometimes on the boat that's where you get to talk and get close to your teammates the most, and sometimes we have to cut that short. But yeah.
Well, I would imagine if you lose focus, everyone could end up in the water. So, so there's probably good reason for that. And you used a term that most of us probably aren't familiar with. Was it coxswain?
Yeah. So a
People.
coxswain. Oh, I'm sorry. Coxswain, as I think Gabriel or David mentioned, is the little person in the front giving instructions. And yeah, they basically just tell you, they tell you how to start, 3/4, half, 3/4, lengthen out. They tell you where the boats are around you. They tell you if you are messing up, they can see everything in the boat. They tell you if you need to fix your oar, get in line with everyone else. It's just like a mini coach inside the boat.
That's really interesting. And I did notice that, and I don't recall her name, the woman who was in that role in the film, she was a fairly tiny woman. Is that pretty typical? Right.
I think on Ethan's team, the boys' team, they have like a 10-year-old boy as their coxswain, which is kind of funny, but they're usually pretty small and skinny people are the coxswain, usually the least athletic on the team.
All right, and I'm seeing nods, so I think that there's agreement on that. There was another term in the film that many people may not have been familiar with, catching a crab. All right, based on reaction, Gabriel, tell us what that means.
All right, so generally, you put your oar in the water, you move it, it comes out cleanly. You do that again. In a race, you do that probably 200 times. Catching a crab is when you kind of screw up. The oar gets stuck in the water. Either you didn't put it in like this, you put it in feathered, and so I can't really see my hand in my webcam, but it's basically your oar gets screwed up, and either it can hit you, it can stop the boat. If you really do a number on it, it can actually knock you out of the boat, and that's called an ejector crab. David, did you ever catch one? But so you don't want to catch some, but if you do, your teammates won't let you forget about it. So.
All right, yeah, David, sounds like you're a witness to that. So,
Yes.
yeah. All right.
I was right there in the water.
Oh wow, that sounds awful. So towards the end of the film, well, they weren't young people anymore, right? But we'll call them the manly high rollers. That's what we'll call them. They rode with members of the police department, and I think that for me that was a really profound moment. Percy, can you speak to the symbolism in that moment and how you have seen law enforcement come alongside community in different ways over the last couple of years?
There is a post that I can't remember who posted it, but I reshared it and reshared it. A police officer recently in Westland pulled a guy over, and his 5-year or 6-year-old daughter was in the back seat. And he said, I think the guy may have had a tail light or headlight out or something like that, something very minor. And once he gets to the car, he says, well, why isn't your daughter in the car seat? He said, coronavirus, I've died from heart. It's been difficult, bouncing back. I've had to make some sacrifices. Unfortunately, a car seat is something I shouldn't have sacrificed, but must have been so tight that I had to. So this tear-jerking moment, the police officer said, follow me. Took the gentleman and the daughter to Walmart and purchased a car seat for them. So sometimes law enforcement has to understand that it's not 100% about arresting someone. It's not 100% about detention. That it's also, as a community servant and protector, that it's also about care. It's also about social work. It's also understanding the backstory to why people fall in situations. We had the press release last year for the Ignite program, and something Chief McCormick said that will always stick with me. She shared a story where a police officer pulled her over 5 times. So only at the 6th moment of pullover, the officer finally said, why don't you go get a driver's license? The participant then explained to the officer that he said, I cannot pass the test to get a driver's license. Now, the unfortunate thing is, then her fine, ticket. If police just took a second in the beginning arrest to find out the backstory to why the gentleman didn't have a driver's license. And sometimes we need to dig just a little deeper. And sometimes it only takes just a few words to find out what are the parts to the current situation that the person is in. And that's what we're starting to see now with policing across the community. That's what we're starting to understand, that people in law enforcement is so much deeper than them. It's so much deeper than the person is in that very moment. Most times, something as simple as a person has a headlight or a tail light out, they probably can't afford to repair it immediately. So why are you criminalizing somebody in a financial crunch? That makes absolutely no sense. Why are you taking someone to jail who is in a financial crunch? All that does is spiral and snowballs. You know, a person in jail for a couple of days because they couldn't afford to pay or get something fixed on their vehicle right away. Now they're in jail, they've lost their job, and it's only gotten worse for them. We need to look at policing, and we need to look at police officers in more humanistic roles, more like social workers, care workers, and not just people who arrest and detain people for the right and wrong reasons.
Yeah, excellent insights. And I think, police officers have, in not in every community, but in many communities have stepped up, and there's training that's happening, and just the real starts of reframing what their role in society is. And I love what you said about basically how do you criminalize something that's an economic issue, not a criminal issue, right? And people shouldn't get a ticket on top of what they already can't afford to pay or afford to do. That we need different interventions in cases like that. So definitely thank you for those thoughts and those insights. And I think at that moment in the film, it just showed that there are so many opportunities for law enforcement and community to work together and to do things that make a statement, that make an impact. And for me, that was one of the moments in the film where it was like, it just made sense. It just made sense for them to train together and to be out there on the water together. So as we wind down and conclude our conversation, I want to give each of you the opportunity to share either one takeaway that you had from the film or a reason why other people need to see the film. And we'll start with Ethan.
I feel that people should watch the film because not many people get exposure to rowing. It's like a very one-sided sport, and people who could get exposed to it could potentially get out of bad situations that they're in, such as gang violence and other things. And I feel that seeing the film will inspire many people to show their friends or show their family to help them out. So
I think people should watch the movie, especially if they are themselves a Black rower or people of color, because there are a lot of things that I can relate to within the movie. And also, it might encourage them, like Ethan said, to play the sport, which is really, it needs people of color, like my team. Me and Ethan are the only people of color on the team, and it's kind of nerve-wracking when you go to your team every day or go to regattas, which where we race, and only we are the only people um, like ourselves. So yeah, I think seeing the movie was really inspiring, and I hope it inspires other people too.
Percy, same question. Why should people either see the film or what was something that was a profound moment in it for you?
One thing that is really profound for me is a lot of times we get so caught up on data, numbers, statistics, and not understand how the testimony from people are so much bigger than anything counted or recorded numerically. And some of those testimonies, like Gabriel pointed out and David, that came from the parents, the moms, as well as those former rowers, some of the community people, that is so much bigger than, again, data, statistics, and numbers. That's where the real information lies. That's the space that we need to really embrace, because those stories for those young men that came from the young man from that community are a small size of what's happening in that community. An overwhelming number of the people that look like them area is in jail, is in prison, is struggling with some addiction, is struggling emotionally because of the trauma from their upbringing and coming up in poverty. So our strong base for education, again, lies around the testimonies, and that's the space and the pieces we really need to embrace and create change collectively in our communities.
Yeah, I really appreciate that. I think it's really easy to think that one person's story represents the whole, and I think that's a important reminder to look at the individual as an individual, the individual situation, just as much as we look at the film, for example, as the story of the team. It's always also the story of those individuals, and we only know this much of it, right? Which is important. And I think as we meet people, as we encounter people, as we look at news stories, looking at that through a lens of recognizing that this is one moment in that person's life, and there's an entire story, a book that we have not yet read. So thank you for that. Gabriel, a takeaway, or why should someone watch the film?
I think one of the biggest reasons to watch the movie is it's just a good movie. It's a good film. Like, in terms of everything that's out, it's not going to get you bogged down. It's not going to make you feel sad and despair about the fate of the world. It's hopeful. It's inspirational. It will teach you something you don't know if you aren't familiar with Chicago or with rowing. And so if you have the time that you want to learn about something new, you want to feel a little more optimistic, just take the time and watch it. So.
Yeah, great point. I think there's something for everyone, and there's something to learn for everyone, no matter what perspective you're coming into it from. So that's great. And then David, what would you like to share?
Yeah, I mean, I think everybody shared some, almost saying what I was going to say. There are just really great things about it. I mean, it's an amazing movie. Again, there's lots of incredible things you can learn from it. I think one of the things, again, that I spoke a little bit earlier, some of kind of what Percy was saying too, is just, you really understand, there's lots going on in our world, right? It's a real timely movie, in our society and all the inequalities we face. And there's reasons for them. There's reasons why that's there, right? And so it is really impactful. You look at these stories and you hear these stories, and you look, and they're people, right? And you can really see that they're real people, just like all of us, right? We all have certain experiences, but unfortunately, some others face a lot more, issues and other circumstances in their life, right? Whether it's abuse and trauma, for example, the mothers face, as Black women in the society and coming up, and what they had to deal with, right? And you look at the guys, one of the guys in the team, Alvin, right? You look, like Percy saying, look at the data, you look on the record, he was incarcerated, but you meet the man, you meet him, like I've gotten a chance to know him and talk with him. He's just an amazing human being, right? The biggest heart you could ever imagine, right? And you listen to the story, right, and see what he had to deal with, and how maybe any of us would have done the same thing that he did, right? In terms of being a protector for his family, his sister, just these stories, and it's real people in these situations, and then, how do we get out of it? You're building those relationships, the guys in the boat, they've developed these strong relationships through this vehicle of rowing, which I think is an amazing way to do it, right? It forces you to all be engaged. You're in a new environment on this water. You have to work together to do anything. And those bonds are so strong. So that was an amazing piece of it. But then you can see that, again, the impact that had, and that change that brought them through, and the relationships, as we spoke about, with dealing with police and communities, and I think that's such a big part of it, is understanding people. Like Percy was saying, you get a little bit deeper and realize the real situation, the real people in it. And if you can build, and that's what gives me the hope that Gabriel was saying, you build, and you build relationships, you build communities, you do that hard work that's not maybe glamorous, that's what gives you hope that, okay, maybe we can attack some of these problems and make an impact. So a great movie, great music in the movie, great story. And it'll leave you really thinking and hopeful, I think, once you done watching.
Great. I want to give a sincere thank you to each of our panelists for being with us today, for your passion for the sport and for our communities, and then also just your insights about the film. I think that this is going to be watched by many folks, and I would encourage anyone who has not seen the film to watch it on Peacock. There's something there for everybody, and there's definitely something to learn. And there's some things that I took away from it that I'm able to just readily apply to life, because it is so translatable, I think, to anybody in anywhere that you kind of are. I will say that it also can lead to more work for you, because when you start to think about some of the injustices that exist, you might get fired up, and you may want to connect with someone on the panel to do something, right? Whether it's in the sport, or it's in communities, or with the criminal justice system. Just so much to take away from it. And I think Gabriel said it, it's just a good film, right? And it's good for all of us to see. So thank you guys for being with us. I want to remind everyone that our next film is coming up in January. And the film is called Finding Fellowship. And so it is the story of a street called Fellowship, but it's also the story of some churches Black churches and white churches that were able to come together around a common project and shared interest. And it's about the history of a place called Quince Orchards, but it's applicable to any community that we're in, right? So it's about legacy, but then it's also about, you know, the future and about churches coming together to make an impact. So that screening is on January 13th at the Flint Institute of Arts. And then also our panel discussion will be the following Saturday on January 15th at 2 p.m. right here on Facebook. So again, thank you to our panelists. Thank you to all of those that are watching with us. Hope that you have an enjoyable rest of your weekend. And please, please, please share this with others so that they can benefit from the rich knowledge and passion that our panelists have shared. Thanks so much, and I hope that you have a good rest of your day.